Chapter 15 of Pellucidar. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ralph Snelson. Pellucidar by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Chapter 15. Conquest and Peace. The fleet sailed directly for Hooge's Island, coming to anchor at its northeastern extremity before the flat-topped hill that had been Hooge's stronghold. I sent one of the prisoners ashore to demand an immediate surrender, but as he told me afterward, they wouldn't believe all that he told them, so they congregated on the cliff top and shot futile arrows at us. In reply, I had 5 of the feluccas cannonade them. When they scampered away at the sound of the terrific explosions, and at sight of the smoke and the iron balls, I landed a couple of hundred red warriors and led them to the opposite end of the hill into the tunnel that ran to its summit. Here we met a little resistance, but a volley from the muzzle loaders turned back those who disputed our right of way, and presently we gained the mesa. Here again we met resistance, but at last the remnant of Hooge's horde surrendered. Juog was with me, and I lost no time in returning to him and his tribe the hilltop that had been their ancestral home for ages until they were robbed of it by Hooge. I created a kingdom of the island, making Juog king there. Before we sailed, I went to Gurgurgur, chief of the beast men, taking Juog with me. There the 3 of us arranged a code of laws that would permit the brute folk and the human beings of the island to live in peace and harmony. Gurgurgur sent his son with me back to Sari, capital of my empire, that he might learn the ways of the human beings. I have hopes of turning this race into the greatest agriculturists of Pellucidar. When I returned to the fleet, I found that one of the islanders of Juog's tribe, who had been absent when we arrived, had just returned from the mainland with the news that a great army was encamped in the land of Awful Shadow, and that they were threatening Thuria. I lost no time in weighing anchors and setting out for the continent, which we reached after a short and easy voyage. From the deck of the Amaz I scanned the shore through the glasses that Perry had brought with him. When we were close enough for the glasses to be of value, I saw that there was indeed a vast concourse of warriors entirely encircling the walled village of Gork, chief of the Thurians. As we approached, smaller objects became distinguishable. It was then that I discovered numerous flags and pennants floating above the army of the besiegers. I called Perry and passed the glasses to him. "Gok of Sari," I said. Perry looked through the lenses for a moment and then turned to me with a smile. "The red, white, and blue of the empire," he said. "It is indeed your Majesty's army." It soon became apparent that we had been sighted by those on shore, for a great multitude of warriors had congregated along the beach watching us. We came to anchor as close in as we dared, which with our light feluccas was within easy speaking distance of the shore. Gok was there, and his eyes were mighty wide too, for as he told us later, though he knew this must be Perry's fleet, it was so wonderful to him that he could not believe the testimony of his own eyes even while he was watching it approach. To give the proper effect to our meeting, I commanded that each felucca fire 21 guns as a salute to His Majesty Gok, King of Sari. Some of the gunners, in the exuberance of their enthusiasm, fired solid shot, but fortunately they had sufficient good judgment to train their pieces on the open sea, so no harm was done. After this we landed, an arduous task, since each felucca carried but a single light dugout. I learned from Gok that the Thurian chieftain Gork had been inclined to haughtiness, and had told Gok, the hairy one, that he knew nothing of me and cared less. But I imagine that the sight of the fleet and the sound of the guns brought him to his senses, for it was not long before he sent a deputation to me, inviting me to visit him in his village. Here he apologized for the treatment he had accorded me, very gladly swore allegiance to the empire, and received in return the title of king. We remained in Thuria only long enough to arrange the treaty with Gork, among the other details of which was his promise to furnish the imperial army with 1,000 lidi, or Thurian beasts of burden, and drivers for them. These were to accompany Gok's army back to Sari by land, while the fleet sailed to the mouth of the great river from which Dian, Juag, and I had been blown. The voyage was uneventful. We found the river easily and sailed up it for many miles through as rich and wonderful a plain as I have ever seen. At the head of navigation we disembarked, leaving a sufficient guard for the feluccas, and marched the remaining distance to Sari. Gok's army, which was composed of warriors of all the original tribes of the Federation, showing how successful had been his efforts to rehabilitate the empire, marched into Sari some time after we arrived. With them were the 1,000 lidi from Thuria. At a council of the kings it was decided that we should at once commence the great war against the Mahars, for these haughty reptiles presented the greatest obstacle to human progress within Pellucidar. I laid out a plan of campaign which met with the enthusiastic endorsement of the kings. Pursuant to it, I at once dispatched 50 lidi to the fleet, with orders to fetch 50 cannon to Sari. I also ordered the fleet to proceed at once to Anarok, where they were to take aboard all the rifles and ammunition that had been completed since their departure, and with a full complement of men to sail along the coast in an attempt to find a passage to the inland sea, near which lay the Mahars' buried city of Phutra. Ja was sure that a large and navigable river connected the Sea of Phutra with the Lural Az, and barring accident the fleet would be before Phutra as soon as the land forces were. At last the great army started upon its march. There were warriors from every one of the federated kingdoms. All were armed either with bow and arrows or muzzle loaders, for nearly the entire Mezop contingent had been enlisted for this march, only sufficient having been left aboard the feluccas to man them properly. I divided the forces into divisions, regiments, battalions, companies, and even to platoons and sections, appointing the full complement of officers and non-commissioned officers. On the long march I schooled them in their duties, and as fast as one learned I sent him among the others as a teacher. Each regiment was made up of about 1,000 bowmen, and to each was temporarily attached a company of Mezop musketeers and a battery of artillery, the latter our naval guns, mounted upon the broad backs of the mighty lidi. There was also one full regiment of Mezop musketeers and a regiment of primitive spearmen. The rest of the lidi that we brought with us were used for baggage animals and to transport our women and children, for we had brought them with us, as it was our intention to march from one Mahar city to another until we had subdued every Mahar nation that menaced the safety of any kingdom of the empire. Before we reached the plain of Phutra, we were discovered by a company of Sagos, who at first stood to give battle, but upon seeing the vast numbers of our army, they turned and fled toward Phutra. The result of this was that when we came in sight of the 100 towers which marked the entrances to the buried city, we found a great army of Sagos and Mahars lined up to give us battle. At 1,000 yards we halted, and placing our artillery upon a slight eminence at either flank, we commenced to drop solid shot among them. Ja, who was chief artillery officer, was in command of this branch of the service, and he did some excellent work, for his Mezop gunners had become rather proficient by this time. The Sagos couldn't stand much of this sort of warfare, so they charged us, yelling like fiends. We let them come quite close, and then the musketeers, who formed the first line, opened up on them. The slaughter was something frightful, but still the remnants of them kept on coming until it was a matter of hand-to-hand fighting. Here our spearmen were of value, as were also the crude iron swords with which most of the imperial warriors were armed. We lost heavily in the encounter after the Sagos reached us, but they were absolutely exterminated. Not one remained, even as a prisoner. The Mahars, seeing how the battle was going, had hastened to the